So for those of you who don't know, Biden, in his last weeks in office, has authorized Ukraine to use its ATACMS missiles to strike deeper into Russian territory. The reason this is significant is because in order to maintain an offensive inside of Ukraine, Russia needs to keep its logistical centers nearby in order to supply them. Food, water, ammunition, fuel, basically everything you need to keep a large army going, you need to keep supply centers nearby. This is one of the big difficulties with modern conflict, where you can send drones and missiles can go hundreds and hundreds of miles. It's actually really difficult to keep the logistical centers where you need to. It's one of the reasons why the Iraq War was so goddamn expensive for us, because we didn't have an easily accessible, easily usable, well-developed local logistical network. We had to build it up in our, the countries, the allied nations, and we had to largely provide it ourselves. Flying those resources over is a lot more expensive than just relying on them being nearby. Anyway, this gives Ukraine the ability to strike these logistical centers from further away. A lot of people are saying this is World War III. I'd like to make the argument for you that it is not, in fact, World War III. For one, Russia has been threatening to, see this as an act of aggression and escalate and so on. They've said that about literally everything Ukraine and the West has done. So I don't think Russia's word on this is very good. Russia keeps threatening to consider the war escalated. This is an act of war by NATO. They've been saying that all this time, They've been saying this entire time. It's not, they've been, for 2.5 years now, they've been saying this, all right? Ukraine is never going to win this war unless they can deal with the logistics centers inside of Russia and make it impossible for Russia to attack in Ukraine, in Ukraine's territory. Russia is certainly allowed to attack inside Ukraine's territory. It seems kind of unfair to say that they can't, do tit for tat. Nah, Kahuna, that's not happening. Anyway, my argument basically is that if what Trump is probably going to try to do as soon as he enters office is he's going to try to force Ukraine to surrender the territory that it has lost to Russia. Basically, end the war at its current line, and all the illegally claimed territory by Russia gets held by Russia. They keep the Donbass, they keep Crimea, they keep the areas they've encroached into, and Ukraine keeps what they have now. The problem with this is that we have previous examples of a so-called ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, and they never worked. They haven't worked. Remember the annexation of Crimea? Remember the invasion of the Donbass? Remember the Minsk 1 and 2 accords, both of which were violated by both sides, but I would argue pretty substantially, mostly Russia. Russia has never at any point ceded ground on this. They just keep coming and coming and coming. So my argument basically is, okay, if you pause the war where it is right now, if you force the war to end, if you say, Zelensky, no more money, no more weapons, no more resources, nothing, you get nothing anymore, you have to accept this peace deal where you lose the territory that Russia illegally annexed, and Zelensky has no choice but to accept, all you do is guarantee that a year from now, or maybe even not that, more fighting is going to break out along this line. That's the reason why I've been, relatively aggressive in my support for Ukraine receiving weapons. It's not necessarily because I think that Ukraine will be able to reclaim all their territory. At this point, I don't think that's possible. What needs to happen is Russia needs to be beaten back decisively enough, even along these lines, if that's what it takes, for them to not keep doing this again in the future. What happens if they are forced into peace now? And by forced into peace, what I mean is Trump says, Zelensky, you have no choice, accept these terms. And then a year from now, Russia starts skirmishing over the border again. And of course, because it's Russia, they'll say, oh, Ukraine shot at us, or, the Ukraine has once again engaged in the ethnic persecution of Russian minorities in the eastern front of Ukraine. We have no choice but to invade again. Another 3-day military operation. What happens then? Then they keep going further until eventually this super expansionist, militaristic Russian wannabe empire is now up against the border of Poland. No, 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 no. No, thank you. No. If anything, European nations have gotten increasingly hawkish over time to the Russian threat, because now that Trump has won, and Trump and a lot of the people around him are NATO skeptics. That is to say, they're not fond of paying their NATO dues, and they think that Europe should pay more of their own. And some of them have even fronted the idea of leaving NATO entirely. Look at Tulsi Gabbard as, director of national intelligence. European nations are more they've been incentivized to account for their own defensive costs. And what that basically means is that right now, every day in countries like Poland, their leaders, their business leaders, their political leaders, their cultural leaders are talking about Russia as a military threat and the need for them to fund their own military. Do you really want Russia to be up against Poland's border? Do you have any idea what the Soviet Union did to Poland? You really want them to be up there? You shouldn't. You shouldn't. There's some bad blood there, man. That might be World War III, because Poland is in NATO. If Poland gets attacked or invaded, Article 5 would basically immediately trigger, like, World War III. That's World War III. Ukraine is our only hope at preventing it. Ukraine is the bulwark. Ukraine is the wall. Ukraine is the only country that can resist Russian imperial conquest westward without triggering Article 5. So Ukraine is doing all of us a service. They're preventing the damn war. Let's be real, nobody is triggering Article 5, though. You can think that, and maybe that's true. It would be like the end of the world, after all. But if that's the case, that's the same argument that one might make for continuing to support Ukraine. If we don't think that the powers that be are going to trigger the end of the world, then let's stop them here. I don't want Russia up against Poland's border. And all the evidence we have right now with regard to Russia's behavior indicates that they will absolutely not stop marching westward if Ukraine is forced to stop fighting them now. Why do you think Russia's conditions for a ceasefire so often involve the disarmament of Ukraine? I wonder why, Hey, let's you and I stop shooting at each other. We're definitely done shooting at each other. I no longer want to shoot you. However, as a precondition for us not shooting at each other anymore, I would like you to drop your gun and I will keep mine. But we're not going to shoot each other anymore. I would just feel more comfortable if you dropped your gun. There are many days of peace ahead of us if you will simply drop your weapon. Hey, we'd rather not be the wall. Thank you very much, Vosh. Yeah, do you think I support Russia? I'm sorry, you are the wall. I don't want you to be the wall. I want Russia to retreat and stop. That's why I support you guys getting the weapons. The alternative to you being the wall is you being the ground they tread on as Poland becomes the wall. It's not good. It's horrible. I want peace in Ukraine. It sucks. Why is Putin like this? Well, he's a dictatorial strongman who promised everything to his people and then failed to deliver on it, Like after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the gutting of the Russian economy by, oligarchs and foreign economists, that's us, he strode into power and promised a resurgence, a revitalization, palingenic ultranationalism in the traditional fascistic sense. The problem is that Putin hasn't really done anything to improve the lives of the people under him. So when you're in that position, you kind of have to declare war. So you get, Georgia, Chechen, the second Chechen war, you get all that business. Got to externalize the threat. Now with Ukraine. Well, yeah, to Jay, but I'd really rather it not come to that. Anyway, that's my argument for why I think that supplying weapons to Ukraine and being steadfast in support for them actually lessens the likelihood of World War III. I think that World War III happens when conflict is met between Russia and NATO, and that, direct conflict, boots on the ground warfare. And the only way to prevent that from being even a possibility is to make sure Ukraine holds. If we force Ukraine into a concession now, I think it basically just puts them in a worse position in the future. You realize that if Ukraine is forced to stop now, Western investment in Ukraine will be basically nil, right? There will be no investor confidence because Ukraine will be seen, rightfully so, as a half-controlled nation currently in conflict, even if the conflict is paused. What businesses are going to want to come into Kyiv knowing that at any moment the conflict could resurge, that this entire stretch of eastern Ukraine is under threat constantly, that they're being politically and militarily beleaguered by their much larger neighbor. So Ukraine will stay poor. You know who isn't staying poor? Russia. Because Trump is going to lift the sanctions, Trump's going to pressure the rest of the world to lift the sanctions, and Russia does make quite a bit of money on account of its massive territory and its oil reserves, and natural gas reserves mostly. Russia can build up the funds necessary to continue the conflict. Ukraine can't. So if they pause now, maybe it takes a year, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe it takes 3 months. But Russia will begin again, and Ukraine will be on worse footing then than they are now. So I think this is our best shot. An alternate path to preventing the like World War III or whatever would be deposing Putin. And I don't mean like assassinating him or whatever. I mean establishing political and economic incentives to transition Russia into a better, less dictatorial governance. And if you have any ideas in doing that, good luck, I guess, because that seems quite difficult. That doesn't seem likely to me. Trump, after all, quite likes Putin, so he's not going to facilitate that. I think it's bad that a leader of a major world nation keeps invading people. You know, I think it's bad when we do it. I think it's bad when they do it. But, you know, whatever. Anyway, that's my perspective.